I used to think that memory would fade over time. That after a couple decades, the war would blur like smoke drifting off a cigarette. But no. Some things, the harder you try to forget, the tighter they cling to you. My name's Jack. I was a sergeant in the Marine Corps, stationed in Quang Tri Province in 1969. I was 22 years old back then, and I thought I knew what war was. I'd fired my rifle. I'd seen men die. I'd wiped blood off my buddy's chest with my bare hands. I thought I was numb. But there's one day, one moment, that never left me. Even 50 years later, I still hear the sounds crystal clear in my head. It started like any other patrol. The heat was choking, sweat soaking through the back of my shirt. I still remember the smell of the dirt, the way mud clung to our boots, the stench of old gunpowder that hadn't quite cleared from the night before. Every step through that banana grove felt like it might be my last. I was in the rear, keeping pace with the line. Suddenly there was a sharp crack, like someone stepping on dry leaves. "Did you hear that?" someone whispered. Another sound. Softer but close. Footsteps. Running. And then, a child's scream. High-pitched. Sharp. Cutting through the jungle like a razor. I turned. Instinct took over. My finger pulled the trigger before my brain even had a say. 3 shots. Then silence. Nobody moved. Not a sound in the squad. My heart wasn't beating. Or maybe it was, but I couldn't feel it anymore. Then from the bush, something fell. A small body. A little girl. Maybe 8. Maybe 10. I don't remember her face. I don't remember what she was wearing. But I remember her hair, jet black. And the way she dropped to the ground like a leaf. I thought war would haunt me because of the blood. But it was the sound of a child crying that stayed with me. I wanted to go back in time. I'd trade those 3 bullets for anything, anything at all. But the cruelest thing I ever learned in war. There's no undo button. There's no undo button. And that truth, it doesn't hit you right away. It waits. It sneaks in during the silence. When the gunfire's gone, when no one's calling out anymore, when the only sound left is your own damn breathing. But I didn't fall apart that day. Not on the outside. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't say a word to anyone. I just kept walking. When we got back to camp, no one asked. Maybe they didn't see what happened. Or maybe they did and just chose not to know. Out there, knowing too much is just another weight on your back. Like carrying an extra pack full of ghosts. The next day it was back to business like nothing had happened. Morning started the same, canned eggs, a cigarette lit with shaky fingers, wiping down the rifle barrel with a rag that had long since turned the color of dried blood. Each day out in the bush was a smudged carbon copy of the one before. Only difference was, the next day someone was missing. A name. A laugh. A familiar hand passing you a smoke in the dark. We were soldiers, yeah. But most of us were just kids. 19. 20. Far from home, sleeping with a rifle like a teddy bear, pretending we weren't scared out of our goddamn minds. War didn't take my youth. It forced me to grow up in one night. And I was never that boy again. I remember once, a green recruit asked me, "Sarge, have you ever killed someone?" I didn't answer. Not because I was being tough. Not because I thought I was better. But because I wasn't sure if I could keep going if I started putting names on the faces I'd seen fall. I don't remember every face. Sometimes the smoke's too thick, the adrenaline's too loud. Sometimes someone drops and you don't even know who fired the shot. But I remember the sounds. The cries. The screaming. That one word, mama, in a language I didn't understand. But somehow understood all too well. Then came Billy. Billy from Georgia, always showing off that picture of his girl back home. He took a round to the chest right in front of me. Blood sprayed up into my eyes, hot, thick, and salty. He grabbed my hand trying to say something. I don't know what it was. Her name maybe. A prayer. Or maybe just his last breath. We wrapped him in tarp. Tied it with cord. Then we kept moving. No time to cry. No place for grief. Just the sound of boots in the mud and the jungle buzzing like it wanted to scream louder than us. After that, I stopped sleeping. Not because I was afraid of dying, but because I was afraid of who I'd see in my dreams. Faces I didn't remember killing, but couldn't be sure I didn't. Kids, mothers, shadows running across my sights like ghosts. I'm not afraid of ghosts. I'm afraid of seeing eyes I never got to ask the name behind. At some point I stopped knowing what was right or wrong. Maybe we all did. Every time we walked into a village I shook. Not because of enemy fire, but because I didn't know if the kid holding a coconut was hiding a grenade. The VC were smart. They blended in with the villagers. They used civilians as shields. I once saw an old woman pull an AK from under her Audi. Another time a boy, couldn't have been more than 12, hid a mine in a bag of rice. After that, every glance, every smile, every stare felt like a question I couldn't answer. We became paranoid men with loaded rifles. And war fed that paranoia like it was fuel. One time we heard a noise in a hut, just a tiny click. We tossed a frag grenade in without thinking. Turned out to be a damn wooden rat trap. Caught a lizard. We all laughed like lunatics. But no one thought it was funny. We laughed to hide the fact our hands were shaking. And that we almost killed, again. At first I came to Vietnam to kill the enemy. But after a while I couldn't tell who the enemy was anymore. The line between a threat and a civilian? Sometimes it was just a blink too slow, a move too quick, a cry in the wrong place at the wrong time. And then came that day. The footsteps behind the banana trees. The voice yelling. The instinct. The trigger. I wish I could say everything slowed down in that moment. Like in the movies, when the bullet floats through the air, screams get muffled and everything moves like it's underwater. But the truth is, it all happened so damn fast I barely remember the details. I just remember the footsteps, fast, clumsy, crashing through banana trees. Then a voice. Muffled. Not English. Not even Vietnamese I recognized. Something felt wrong. I raised my rifle. No time to think. Just instinct. Pulled the trigger. One shot. Then another. Silence. I stepped forward. My legs shaking, heart pounding like a drum inside my throat. And that's when I saw the boy. Couldn't have been more than 11 or 12. Barefoot. Holding a papaya in his hands. No weapon. No threat. Just a child. Running toward his mother. She was lying next to him, back scorched, eyes wide open like they never had time to close. She still held a dented aluminum pot in her arms. I didn't kill the enemy. I killed a family dinner that never got to start. I stood there frozen. One of my guys pulled me back, said we didn't have time, that there could be more traps around. But in my head, all I saw were those bare feet, that papaya rolling in the dirt and those wide, unblinking eyes. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that boy staring at me. Not angry. Not scared. Just asking, why? I started to wonder what the hell I'd become. A soldier? A killer? Or just a scared kid holding a rifle that never should have been in his hands? War doesn't kill your conscience all at once. It tears it apart piece by piece, and dares you to keep living like nothing happened. I remember asking my CO the next day. I said, "Sir, have you ever done something you can't forgive yourself for?" He looked at me for a long time, took a drag from his smoke, then said, "Every damn day." After that, I avoided going into villages whenever I could. I started getting nervous around children, old folks, anyone who looked at me without saying a word. I thought about that boy's mother every single day. She could have been anyone, my mom, your mom, the neighbors. The only difference was, she lived in the wrong place at the wrong time and had no one to say it was safe. One day, a chaplain came to our camp to pray with the guys. He asked if anyone wanted to confess. I stood up. But when I got close to him, I couldn't speak. How do you tell someone you shot a child because you thought he might be dangerous? How do you admit you're not sure you're the good guy anymore? Not everyone who survives war walks away whole. Some of us are just empty shells with wounds deeper than any bullet ever made. After that, I started carrying a little notebook. Not to write a journal, I didn't have the guts for that. But to write down the names of the faces I didn't want to forget. Not to remember the guilt, but to hold on to the humanity inside the chaos. I wrote, the boy with the papaya, the mother with the dented pot, Billy in the photo of his girl, the man who wept holding his daughter's body. I don't know if I'll ever be forgiven, but I do know this: if I forget them, I die a different kind of death. And I won't let that happen. I have to keep living, if only to tell the stories no one else got the chance to tell. When I came back from Vietnam, I thought I'd leave everything behind. The war, the memories, the guilt. I figured once I got on that plane and flew out of that place, the past would stay where it was. But no, I brought it all back with me. Not in a duffel bag or a pack. It was buried deeper, somewhere no one could see. Only I could feel it, every time I closed my eyes. I went back to Pennsylvania, the state I was born in. Everything looked the same. Quiet. Peaceful. Like there'd never been a war. People asked, "You doing okay?" I nodded, smiled. And that night, I dreamed of blood hitting my face again. The first time I lost control after the war was in a grocery store. Something dropped. A glass jar shattered on the floor. It wasn't loud. Nothing serious. But my heart stopped. I dropped to my knees, hands over my ears, head down between shelves of canned food. It was like I was hearing a grenade fall on dry ground all over again. People stared at me like I'd gone crazy. And maybe for that moment, I had. War doesn't stay on the battlefield. It lives inside us, under the skin, waiting to rise whenever the world shakes even a little. I started drinking more. Not for fun. To forget. Booze didn't erase the memories, but it numbed me, for a few hours each night. I tried holding jobs. Warehouse loader, night guard, storage clerk. Never lasted more than a few months. Anytime someone touched my shoulder from behind, I reacted like I was being ambushed. Once I punched a coworker. Thought he was VC. By the time I came back to myself, my knuckles were bleeding and the guy was curled up on the ground asking, "What's wrong with you, Jack?" I couldn't answer. Because I didn't know either. I thought about ending it. Not because I was weak, but because I was exhausted. Living with a past no one believed, no one understood. It's like standing in the middle of a crowd and still feeling completely alone. Some wounds don't bleed. They just leak, slowly, quietly, until there's nothing left inside you. Luckily, I didn't go through with it. An old buddy from the Corps, Thomas, showed up one day. He'd made it back too. He was fighting the same nightmares. He's the one who dragged me to a VA counseling center for the first time. I remember that first session like it was yesterday. I sat there for 40 minutes and didn't say a word. The therapist asked, "What do you feel when you close your eyes?" I said after a long silence, "I see myself standing in the jungle, rifle in hand, staring into the eyes of a child, and I can't take another step." After that day I started going weekly. It wasn't always easy. Some days I just sat there shaking. Other days I only got one sentence out before I broke down. But at least, I wasn't alone anymore. One thing that helped me keep going was meeting others who'd done the same, who'd shot when they weren't sure. Not to excuse it, but because we carried the same damn weight. Guilt doesn't vanish when you're forgiven. But it gets lighter when someone listens without judging. I started writing. Not for anyone to read. Just for me. To remember who I was. And what I'd lost. I wrote about Billy, his laugh, the way he always asked me, "Still alive today?" Like it was a joke. I wrote about the kids in the villages. The ones who never got to go to school. Only knew how to hide from bombs. And I wrote about the boy with the papaya. That story I never told my family. Not my friends. Not even my wife later on. I hid it like a stain that couldn't be washed off. Until one day during a group session I told it. My voice cracked. My hands clenched. Every word felt like it was cutting my throat open. When I finished, the room went silent. An older man, hair white as snow, walked over and hugged me. He didn't say anything, just held me. And for the first time in over 20 years, I felt understood. After years of therapy, after all the nightmares, after all the moments I thought I wouldn't make it through, I started to relearn how to live. Not like before the war. I could never go back to being that 22-year-old kid from Pennsylvania. But I learned to live as someone who no longer had to run from everything. I began every morning with a simple routine. Make coffee, sit on the front porch, and stay silent for 5 minutes. No gunfire. No alarms. No one dying today. At first, the quiet scared me. It felt like the silence after a blast, like the moment right before a tripwire snaps. But slowly I realized, silence can heal too. I got married. She was a widow with 2 kids. She knew I carried a wound no one could see. And more importantly, she didn't try to fix it. She just stayed. The first time I told her about the boy with the papaya, she didn't ask why I did it. She just held my hand so tight I had to stop speaking halfway through and buried my face in her shoulder like a broken man. She didn't look at me like a hero. She didn't flinch. She simply stayed. And that was more healing than any counselor, any prayer, any pill. I worked in the local library. Chose a quiet job. Filing books. Keeping order. Reading to kids on Friday afternoons. There was a little girl, maybe 7, who used to sit and listen to my fairy tales. One day she asked, "Mr. Jack, were you ever afraid of the dark?" I almost laughed. Hell yes. I used to be so afraid of the dark I couldn't close my eyes. But I didn't say that. I just patted her head and said, I was afraid of a lot of things. But someone helped me not be afraid anymore. It wasn't a lie. Just a simpler version of the truth. I joined a group of veterans who spoke at schools. We didn't tell stories for glory. We didn't preach. We told kids what war really was. That it wasn't like video games. That every explosion meant someone didn't go home. That there were no winners, only survivors. Once, after one of those talks, a student asked me, "Did you ever forgive yourself?" He was maybe 16. Hoodie, long hair, bright eyes. Curious. I looked at him and said, "I don't know yet. But I'm trying." And that's the truth. Forgiveness doesn't come all at once. It's not a moment. It's a road. Long, uneven. With turns, stumbles, stops, and sometimes steps backward. I started writing a memoir. Not to publish. Just to record it, for my son, my grandson, for anyone who wants to know what war really does. Not the glory. Not the violence. But the part where a man tries to survive a world that no longer has clear lines between right and wrong. I still have nightmares, but fewer now. Still flinch when something explodes, but I know how to breathe through it. And every year, I visit the Veterans Cemetery. I place my hand on the gravestones of men I once knew. Some I remember clearly. Others only by their laugh or the way they smoked their cigarettes. I always whisper the same 3 words, "I'm so sorry." Not because I was always wrong, but because some things just should have never happened that way. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope the ones who are gone know, I never forgot them. I used to think PTSD was the worst thing a soldier could bring home. The nightmares. The panic attacks. The way fireworks on the 4th of July made your heart stop. But over time I realized there's something even heavier than PTSD. Something quieter. Something slower. And far harder to heal. They call it moral injury. It's what happens when you do something, or witness something, that goes against every value you were raised with. When you look at your own actions and don't recognize the man behind them. When the mirror stops being a place to straighten your collar, and starts being the thing you avoid every morning. I shot a child because I thought he might be carrying a grenade. I threw a grenade into a hut because I heard a noise and killed a mother dog and her pups. I gave the order to torch a village because we believed VC were hiding there. There weren't. Just old folks too slow to run. None of that is in my medical file. No one wrote it down on my injury report. But it gnawed at me every night in a way no bullet ever could. Moral injury doesn't make you bleed. It makes you disappear from yourself. slowly, quietly, like leaking from the inside out. I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of becoming the man I swore I'd never be. Once I asked my therapist if I was a bad person. She asked me, "Do you feel remorse?" I said, "Every second." She replied, "Bad people don't lose sleep over what they've done, Jack. Bad people don't feel regret." But that didn't make me feel better. Because I didn't need to be told I was good. I just wanted to stop feeling like a killer every time I saw a child's face on the street. There are good days. I drink my coffee, read books, tease my grandson. I can even smile through the news without switching it off halfway. And then there are bad days. Days when everything falls apart because of a passing ambulance, or a little boy in a green t-shirt that looks too much like the one from back then. I'm not trying to forget. Forgetting feels like betrayal. I choose to remember, and learn how not to let the memories devour me. I've met other vets like me. Men who carried something they couldn't name until they heard those two words, moral injury. And when they heard it, their eyes changed. Like someone had finally said the name of their pain out loud. We don't need pills. We need acknowledgement. That moral wounds are real. That they hurt just as much as the bullets. The only difference is, you can't see them. Some scars live in silence. And only when we name them, can they start to heal. I don't tell these things to be pitted. I tell them so no one else has to carry it alone. If someone out there is listening, someone who's been feeling something they can't quite name, I want them to know, it has a name. And they are not alone. I'm not a victim. I'm a survivor, not of war but of myself. And every day I'm still breathing, I take it as a chance to tell the truth. To share. To speak plainly. No sugarcoating. No hiding. Because the truth, even when it hurts, is the only thing that might save us from ourselves. I used to think healing was something doctors did. That someone else would come along and fix the broken part of me. That if I sat still long enough, stayed patient, someone would repair me and I'd be normal again. But after many years I realized, no one can heal you but yourself. Healing doesn't come in a bottle. It's not hidden in whiskey. It doesn't live inside a slogan like, just think positive. It arrives slowly like the first light cutting through early morning fog. Not sharp, not dramatic, but just enough to remind you, you're still here. I started small. Morning walks. Not for fitness. Just to feel the ground beneath my feet. Each step reminded me I wasn't in the jungle anymore. This was real. The path was real. I wasn't running. I began spending time with men like me, quiet veterans not into medals or loud stories. We'd sit together, sometimes for an hour without saying much. But in that silence, there was a gentleness. No need to explain. No need to relive details. Just being near someone who carries the same kind of broken. I learned how to write. Not for others. For myself. Writing gave me back some control. It let me say, I'm still here and I still have a voice. I wrote for Billy. For the boy with the papaya. For the mother with the dented pot. For all the names I couldn't say out loud but could never forget. Healing isn't about forgetting. It's learning how to live without letting the wound define you. I learned how to say I'm sorry. Not to the world. To myself. Because for too long, I hated myself so deeply I forgot I was still someone worth forgiving. I talked to my son. He never went to war, but he grew up with a father who wasn't really there. I was a shadow, present but cold. In the house but miles away. I apologized to him. And he hugged me. Didn't say a word. Just held on. In that moment, I felt like I was becoming a father again. Not perfect, but present. I let music back into my life. For a while, I couldn't stand the sound of drums. They sounded too much like explosions. But now I play the old songs, soul, country, the ones Billy used to hum at the camp. And I sing along. I'm not good, but I'm real. I planted things. Every time I dug into the dirt, I felt like I was doing the opposite of war. War destroys. But this time my hands were giving life. One day my grandchild asked me, "Grandpa, did you ever kill anyone?" I didn't dodge it. I said, yes. He didn't ask more. Just sat beside me quiet. Then after a minute he said, "But now you're a good guy, right?" I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "I'm trying." And I think that's the most honest definition of healing I've ever known. It's not about going back to who you were. It's about trying, every single day. I still have bad nights. Still wake up in a sweat, heart racing, dragged back into places I never want to revisit. But now I know, I can open my eyes. And I'll be here. In my home. With the woman I love. I'm not on the battlefield anymore. War may have taken a piece of my soul. But what's left? I will guard with everything I have. There are things I've never told anyone. Not because I forgot, but because they're still here, vivid, alive, and far too heavy to say out loud. Not everything that happened in the war can be turned into words. Some things, if I spoke them, I'm afraid people would never look at me the same. I'm afraid they'd see a monster, not a man who did what he had to do to survive. One night during a sweep operation we caught a teenage boy, probably no older than 17. His hands were trembling, eyes wide open like they were ready to pop out of his skull. An officer gave me the order to do what needed to be done. And I did. No questions. No hesitation. I still remember the coldness in my hands afterward, not from the blood but from the way my heart stopped beating for a moment. No one spoke about it the next morning. We had breakfast like we always did. Someone even cracked a joke. But I knew deep down that a piece of me had died that night. I didn't lose my soul in one big battle. I lost it in little pieces, through moments no one ever talks about. Another time we found a bag of unsent letters on a dead North Vietnamese soldier. I didn't read all of them. But one was addressed to his mother. The handwriting was delicate, careful, like he'd spent hours making sure every word was just right. I stuffed it into my pocket, and later that day I burned it, not out of hate, but because I couldn't stand the thought of a mother never receiving those words. I never told anyone that, not my wife, not my therapist, not even God if he's listening. Because some things, once you say them, they hang in the air. They don't disappear. They just hover and weigh down everyone who hears them. I think most men who've seen combat have a secret vault like that. Not in files. Not in reports. Just tucked away in memory, like ink stains that never quite come out. I once tried to write it all down. One night I opened an old notebook, picked up a pen and started. But I couldn't get past the first sentence. My hands were shaking. My chest felt like it was closing in. And I realized, some things are best left in silence. Not because I'm avoiding them, but because it's how I stay alive. I'm no hero. But I'm not a coward either. I'm the result of moments, choices, orders, and split seconds where there wasn't time to think, only to act. I don't expect anyone to understand. I just hope that maybe someone out there can hear me and not judge. If you knew what I did to survive, you might never forgive me. But if you knew what I've carried since, maybe you'd think twice before casting the first stone. I've spent most of my life thinking about war. But I don't want my children or grandchildren to understand it by living through it. No one should have to learn about war by fighting one. I don't want the next generation to see war as some Hollywood production, filled with explosions, slow-motion hero shots, and a soundtrack that makes it all seem noble. I want them to understand that behind every bullet is a decision. Every body is an unfinished story. And every soldier who comes home is never quite the same. Once I heard a kid at school ask one of my buddies, "Was war fun?" He didn't mean harm. He just thought it was some kind of adventure. A game. And I get it. Because what they're shown, on screens, in games, in movies, has been trimmed and polished to go down easy. But the truth doesn't go down easy. War is screaming. It's blood in the dirt. It's the look in a man's eyes as he stares down the barrel of his own weapon, unsure if he's still one of the good guys. It's sleeping with your eyes open. It's names no one remembers. It's mistakes you carry to your grave. I don't tell these stories to scare my grandchildren about war. I tell them so they'll appreciate peace. I don't want them to hate anyone. I don't want them to carry bitterness. I just hope they'll learn that before anyone sends young people into battle, they should listen to someone who's come back from one. I want the next generation to learn to ask, why? Why are we fighting? Why are we dying? Why me? Why us? Because in war, if you stop asking questions, you'll lose who you are. I want them to know that courage doesn't always mean pulling the trigger first. Sometimes it means knowing when not to pull it at all. That the quiet of an old veteran can be louder than any general's shout. And that the deepest wounds don't come from the bullets. They come later when you ask yourself, what if I'd made a different choice? I want my grandkids to understand that their grandfather wasn't a hero. But he wasn't a villain either. He was just a man who made mistakes, felt regret, and tried to make things right. I want them to grow up in a world where they don't have to tell stories like the ones I'm telling now. If the next generation doesn't have to retell war, maybe we've finally learned something. I'm not telling these stories to be praised, and I'm not sharing them for pity. I'm telling them because I know there are others like me, people carrying nameless things, walking through the world like ghosts, surrounded but alone. I tell these stories for the soldiers who made it back, but whose souls never really left the dust and gunfire. I tell them for those who never went to war, but who battle themselves every single day. I tell them for the ones suffering in silence, through sleepless nights, through distant stares across the dinner table, through the words they can't quite say. And I tell them for me, to remind myself that I survived, that I'm still here, and that surviving doesn't mean burying everything. Sometimes surviving isn't just about making it through the war. Sometimes it's about having the courage to tell it. I don't know who will hear these words. Maybe just a few people. Maybe thousands. But if even one person, just one, hears this and feels a little less alone, then every memory I dragged up, every wound I reopened to speak this truth, will have meant something. War doesn't end when the guns go quiet. Keeps going, in dreams, in silence, in all the things left unsaid. But in telling, in honesty, in facing what we were once afraid to remember, maybe that's when war truly ends. And if someone out there is listening, I want you to know, you're not alone. You're not broken. You're not forgotten. You are proof that a human being can survive what should have destroyed them. And as long as we can still speak, maybe we're not completely lost. If this story made you think of someone, a friend, a loved one, or a part of yourself that never quite healed, share it. Because sometimes, one quiet story is exactly what someone out there needs to hear in order to find their way back.